Hello, my name is Jacob Sullivan, and I'm a Senior Product Manager at AWS. I'm excited today to be presenting in partnership with Keith Blizzard, the SVP of Public Cloud Services at Fidelity Investments. And today we're going to be talking about modern DevOps processes and how AWS is helping customers reimagine what's possible in DevOps through best practices and innovative new AWS services such as Amazon DevOps Guru. Amazon DevOps Guru is an easy to use and powerful service that will help you manage the application and workload availability challenges that we all encounter in cloud operations. So a little bit later in this talk, I'm going to turn it over to Keith, and he's going to share his own perspective on DevOps at Fidelity Investments and his experience with our service, DevOps Guru. So to get us started today, I'm going to give a really brief overview of what we're seeing our customers in the market and how they think about IT operations. I'm going to talk a bit about the specific challenges that we are seeing related to cloud ops before Keith's going to cover the Fidelity journey and really talk about pilot to production and how they view these challenges and how they've begun to tackle them using AWS services. And in conclusion, I'm going to do a slightly deeper dive into DevOps Guru itself and talk about specifically how it can help you on your journey. So I get an opportunity on a regular basis to meet with customers, and what we hear is that your business, regardless of the size or the market in which you're operating, we're always under constant pressure to innovate faster and to do so at lower costs in what are rapidly changing business environments. And I listen to customers talk about the challenges that they have in maintaining application availability. That is, how do you operate cloud-based infrastructure and the applications that run on that infrastructure, and how that can be challenging even for the best trained staff and the most fully funded teams. And to address these challenges that they're seeing, we see organizations take on many different approaches. So whether or not you're organized into a centralized IT structure, or you have a globalized oversight in IT, or you've adopted team-based approaches, all of these different approaches, whether you're trying to address these challenges through DevOps practices that are designed to improve the speed and quality of the applications that you're building and testing or are delivering. Or maybe you've even embraced SRE, site reliability engineering, to manage the systems and solve the problems and automate the operational tasks. Regardless of how you're structured or the different approaches that you've taken, many of the things that we're going to talk about today will help you in this journey. So don't be fooled by the name of our talk or the fact that the AWS service that we're talking about today is called DevOps Guru. These tools and best practices are applicable to companies of all shapes and sizes. And what you'll hear from Keith as he's talking is the holistic approach that they've taken to their cloud journey. One of the great things about AWS is that it supports the pace of business accelerating. AWS helps you quickly spin up resources as you need them. It helps you deploy hundreds or thousands of servers in minutes. This means you can quickly deploy new applications. You can experiment. You can innovate. You can move more quickly and make changes more frequently. And all of these capabilities are great, but maintaining application availability for your business critical workloads or your revenue generating applications in this highly flexible and constantly changing set of systems can be challenging for any set of operators. So oftentimes I put myself in those shoes and I think, well, what if I am the manager of a DevOps or SRE team and I'm tasked with standing up a new application or a new microservice? Well, first I'm going to rely very heavily on my own experience, right? And knowing what types of operational problems are going to occur in production, or my knowledge of how AWS resources operate, or what applications and tools that we want to use. And I'm going to combine that with hopefully a deep understanding of the metrics that are available, the telemetry that I can instrument to help monitor and manage these applications. In the best case, I've written a playbook that provides a foundation for my team to get started. an operations readiness review to check my work after we've begun implementation. And as we're all constantly innovating and modernizing or pushing the boundaries of efficiency and performance, we're going to continue as a team and as individual developers to encounter situations that are truly new to us. We haven't seen them before. And as I look across the landscape of hundreds or thousands of metrics available in any application that I stand up, I'm probably going to default to standard practices. I'm going to build a dashboard to watch 20 or 30 of these key indicators. And I'm going to add that to a collection of dashboards that I've already built for dozens or even hundreds of other applications that my team and other teams are staffed to monitor and overview. And what happens as I'm building these static dashboards and as I'm looking at the different metrics and calibrating alarms, I'm going to find that some of my alarms are too sensitive. And I may choose to live with an excessive amount of notifications because what really keeps me up at night is missing a challenge or missing a problem with one of my applications. And I'm afraid that I might miss those issues in the future. So I add more alarms to what I've got going on. And at the end of the day, I have just a tremendous amount of data that and my team as human beings are expected to consume and be able to monitor. And at the very end of the day, if I find some extra time, I might go back and update that original playbook that I mentioned with all of these things that I've learned to try and document it and take it out of tribal knowledge and build it into repeatable automated processes of some kind. And that optimization, that need to constantly change my operational stature for my applications is only driven again by this pace of the business to continually accelerate. So what we find is that today's tools and processes are quite insufficient for the challenges that we face. And existing automation systems that are designed to help, they themselves can be difficult to instrument, configure, and maintain over long periods of time. So as we talk to customers and see what we're doing today, we see a few key challenges begin to emerge. So specifically, there are four that I want to talk about today briefly. First, what we find is that operators are just overwhelmed with the volume and diversity of available operational data. Even a small example application like I was talking about before, let's say based on AWS resources such as Lambda, S3, and a DynamoDB, can have hundreds of metrics to choose from for creating alarms and dashboards. And choosing from those possible metrics and then properly calibrating those alarms can lead to excessive notifications or missing alerts. And thirdly, what we find is that when issues do occur, manually collecting and sifting through all of the available metrics and logs to try and find useful information while your applications are down, while your customers are impaired, can be incredibly difficult and stressful. And fourthly, in the world of continuous improvement, continuous deployment, that means you need to be continuously updating the metrics, alarms, and dashboards in your operational posture. And this business demand that's driving all of this changes does not abate because we have these operational challenges. And ultimately, that leads to skipped steps, missed opportunities, overwhelmed teams, and the overall situation is impairing or reducing the quality of applications that we find in production. And ultimately, this, of course, is leading to lost revenue or impaired productivity. So how can AWS help with this challenge? Well, we've developed a service called Amazon DevOps Guru. This is a fully managed operations service that is using machine learning to make it easier for developers and operators to improve application availability. This service does so by automatically detecting operational issues and recommending specific actions for remediation or mitigation. Amazon DevOps Guru is applying machine learning that's informed by years of Amazon.com and AWS operational excellence to automatically collect and analyze data, such as metrics, logs, traces, events, to identify behaviors that deviate from normal operating patterns. And I'll get into the specifics of how this service works after Keith has had a chance to share his story, but many of the challenges that we've talked about are truly data science challenges. They're challenges that we can make so much better with the proper application of machine learning. So briefly, I want to talk about some of the key capabilities and values that DevOps Guru brings, because these tenets really inform overall how the service is going to work for you. So first and foremost, we focused on an easy to set up and easy to use service. There's no configuration required. And I'll walk you through an example of this a little bit later in the talk, but you simply point us at the applications or workloads that you want us to monitor. And beyond that, there's no setup that's required. So there's no expectation that you or your team understands machine learning, understands the wide array or landscape of metrics and logs that are available to help you manage your AWS applications. Secondly, we auto detect operational issues. So we correlate, collect, and analyze the streams of different data that's available on the AWS resources and your applications that are running on them. We do this and apply a collection of pre-trained machine learning detectors to be able to spot when that behavior changes, as well as collect that data for you to view it. In many ways, you can think of it as a dashboard that's created on the fly, specifically for whatever incidents or occurrence that are happening within your system. The entire solution is designed around this idea of quick resolution. We're aggregating and correlating, but we're filtering. We're bringing together a collection of data that helps you best understand the potential root cause of any incident or issue that is occurring. And we try to collect that into one place for you so you can see the big picture quickly and at a glance. We find that this does a tremendous amount in reducing the amount of time it takes to resolve. So ultimately, we're driving down MTTR, or mean time to resolution, for any application incidents that do occur in your system. Part of this quick resolution is certainly driven by the reduction in noise. So if you have an issue that occurs, you may have 10 or 12 different alarms that are going off all at once. What we're doing is we're watching across all of those metrics for anomalies, but we're then collecting them together and delivering them in a single notification. So instead of receiving multiple alerts, you're receiving alerts that have been packaged together because of their relevance. And additionally to that, since we are using machine learning detectors that are calibrating themselves over time, we don't need broad threshold alarms that need to trigger a lot because you're afraid of missing things, as I mentioned in my previous example, but are really tailored to spotting real changes that are occurring in your system. So the notifications that you do get are more accurate than the general alarms that you're likely setting for your existing operations. And finally, automatically scales. So as you add or remove resources, as you update your applications that are running, as you add entirely new applications and services, our system requires no additional configuration to continue to scale out and contract with your usage. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keith to give you more insight into his journey.
Thanks, Jacob. As you know, we've been super excited to partner and work with AWS right when DevOps Guru was announced. If you look at the problems that Jacob actually just went through, everything from the operational issues, signal detection, reliability, resiliency, these are the core concepts within the cloud team of Fidelity we're looking to enable across. And so if you look at our journey, it's been a multi-year journey for us where a few years back, you have the first set of teams really lean in and on the cloud itself, really drive the level of knowledge, maturity, and how to do this at scale. But as you can imagine, with a large enterprise such as us, you have different teams starting at different points of time and building different knowledge along the way. So that drives a different type of challenge for us. So how do you take all those different teams with different points on where they are, but build out ways to look at the cloud operations, right? It's one area to get people onboarded, the overall service enablement and getting the first set of teams in there. But how do you start looking at your mean time to detect, your mean time to resolve, the resiliency, your HA configurations across region, across zones? You get into some really interesting topics where development teams in general might not have that expertise on. So if you look at what we're trying to do is really mimic a lot of what Jacob mentioned from an overall DevOps guru where we could look across. Let's look at the holistic view of the health of our objects. What is the different types of signal information that we're able to capture? How can I, in the center, as a service provider within the application teams within Fidelity, find easy solutions for us to be able to provide that value back to teams so they're able to focus on what they want, which is building the next innovation, the next generation capability we want to expose to all the customers and clients Fidelity interacts with on a day-to-day basis. But we could look at the harder problems based off data. And so if you look at a little bit on our background, right, we're a huge scale with respect to, the customers and the clients we have 12,000 developers, across that multiple business units, all with their own backlog and priorities, across 1,000 accounts with many thousand applications living within those structures, all within the best practices for security and principles, but pulling in the operational and resiliency component is something that's hard. It's hard because of the shared responsibility model and so forth that many of us have undertaken as we transitioned into DevOps, SRE, and cloud. Each team is responsible to look at the health of the application. But if you look at ways, what can I do? What can I do as a value-added partner with these teams to be able to figure out ways to make it simpler? So we don't have to have experts on every single configuration, every single signal detection, really elevate our observability platforms with not just the data that lives within Fidelity, but how can we tap into Amazon's data? Everything that they use across the ecosystem and the environment itself, I want that insight. I want those details so I can map it across. So taking on these different components allowed us to say, okay, what can I do differently in the center to be able to provide that value-added service, but be consistent? And for me, to simplify my area, my world a little bit by having a common way to do this. So we started like many companies and so forth. We started with, a pilot, right? We looked at what are those architecture patterns that are super hard, right? Where you might be going beyond the traditional IaaS infrastructure and going to EKS, Lambda, a lot of these different areas that amazing serverless capabilities that exist and are exposed to us within the Amazon ecosystem and different areas and so forth. And we're able to actually look at them, identify signals, identify different patterns, and from that then analyze it. Look at all the different information that's being collected and what's repeatable in nature. Are there things that are happening within Amazon and the CSP itself that we could actually look at and observe and build out our programs and playbooks on? Or are there things that we're doing? Are there pushes within our CI/CD pipelines that's causing issues? Right? Having this information where we're able to understand that signal information correspond to our actions and then be able to automate what we do with it. It allows us to be able to look at those common approaches. I love building those Lego bricks where we could actually give different teams based off of those architecture patterns different starting points. So they're starting higher up the stack, and so they don't have to learn everything and do everything themselves. It allows us to really kind of give back across the enterprise itself. And then once you're there, you're going to see what maps, what actually is going to drive the best insight for that arc pattern for those services that you're seeing across your environment. And then you go to production. You start making that change where you actually push it out there and you start seeing the value across a larger and larger scale, right? You drive out that awareness and that overall foundation up across your environment, and then you just scale it, right? It's a very easy pattern for teams to go if you're in the mode to really look at the data and really drive those insights. So if you look at kind of what's the goal, so you asked me, Keith, hey, why are you doing this? What is the value you're looking to do, and why does this fit in? One, this is part of our journey as we drive the reliability, the resiliency, the availability, the AI operations with respect to cloud computing on the components and infrastructure. This is what it's about. First, reducing outages, right? We know things happen. We know things happen across the different objects. How do we look at our signal data differently to really just increase our awareness? Awareness on scheduled and planned events, but also unplanned events, and with the one end goal of just reduce any customer impact. Our goal is to get our MTTR, the mean time to resolve, down to under 5 minutes. Like, that is our goal. It's very simple, very easy sounding, really hard to do. So only through really great data and signals do I have a chance to really drive to that number itself. Right? And this then drives to the 2 and 3, data-driven discussions and decision-making. With all this information, as Jacob mentioned, there's a lot of signals that come directly from AWS and the CSPs. How do we use that to make more productive prioritization conversations, to be able to look for repeatable patterns that I can identify and then govern and enforce across the environment itself? So I can actually have these conversations with that partner transparency. So as I interact with all the different business unit teams and application teams within the environment, I have a starting point. I have insights on things that are happening across the enterprise, and I have customized components and information that can provide back to them, again, to level set and be able to provide a value-added approach. And then what's my vested interest? Yeah, I always have to have something on my end. What do I get out of it? And that's what's on the right. If I can have organizational level consistency across the environment, looking at the signals, looking at a common playbook and way to be able to respond and automate, it's just going to make my life easier as we look across the complete environment itself. And we can solve the most impactful problems and then really drive that to a successful conclusion. So it's been a great journey. I appreciate Jacob and the overall DevOps Guru team, and I challenge you to think about how can you start adding this into your journey ahead.
Thanks, Keith. That's some really great stuff. So how can you get started? As Keith asked, that call to action. Well, first, you can find us in the console. So if you search for DevOps Guru, or you go to aws.amazon.com for DevOps Guru, we offer a free trial. So the first 3 months, we offer the first 7,200 resource hours free, and I'll talk a little bit about pricing in a second, and the first 10,000 API calls free as well. So this is really designed to give you an opportunity to come in, try out the service, and compare it against what your existing observability, dashboard, and operational tools are providing for you. We do recommend, as part of your free trial, since this is a read-only service, that you consider running it in a production environment or in a test environment that most closely mimics the types of production issues and loads that you find. What we have seen in testing is if that it's in a dev account or developer account, as an example, the variations in that account will be substantially different than what you're going to see in your production environments. And over time, the system will attempt to calibrate itself to the conditions that it's seeing. So it may begin to drift a little bit as compared to the types of issues that you're going to find when using the service in production. We support close to 30 of the most commonly used AWS resource types. This certainly covers all of the basic compute and the different frameworks or structures that you have available, whether you're using EC2 and load balancing or in conjunction with containers, Lambda compute, as well as all of the common storage such as S3, your database backups, and as you can see, a relatively wide array of the AWS resource types and services that are available. You can find a complete list of the services and dimensions of those services that we support on our pricing page. But I'd like to spend a couple of minutes and walk you through exactly how the service is operating and what you should expect. When you first come to DevOps Guru, it's going to ask you to select coverage. And what we mean is that we want you to point us towards the applications and workloads that are most critical that you want us to help monitor on your behalf. And you can select either by AWS CloudFormation stacks or by an entire account. A CloudFormation stack is AWS's approach to infrastructure as code. So it's essentially, and it's managed by the AWS CloudFormation team. It's essentially a description of the resources that you've deployed, the AWS resources, such as EC2, S3, API Gateway, etc., and how those resources are connected together. So it gives us a lot of information about how your application is working together with those different resource types. If you're not using CloudFormation stacks, at this time you can select by AWS account. So if you've adopted multi-account practices, then each account essentially is a workload. Now, what happens if you are running many different applications in a single account, you can still select that account, and DevOps Guru will still be quite effective in identifying any anomalies that do occur. But let's say, as an example, you have two separate applications in the same account, and they encounter issues at the same time, but are not related to each other. DevOps Guru may still group those together and provide it to you in a single insight because it doesn't have enough information to differentiate the root cause of those two separate issues. Once you've selected the coverage, that's pretty much the only configuration that you need to do. We will then begin automatically ingesting data from Amazon CloudWatch, AWS Config, and AWS CloudTrail. Now, this data is available in your account whether you're actively using it as part of your operations solutions today. And we'll begin consuming that data and begin analyzing it with a collection of techniques that I'll talk about in a second. If you are using a tracing program such as AWS X-Ray, we will also consume those traces, which will give us a lot of information, more information about how your application is constructed and how the pieces fit together. Once we begin consuming those different data sources, we run over 15 different machine learning detectors in various combinations that are pre-trained on AWS data. But once they're deployed in your account, they're going to calibrate themselves, or as it's called, they'll parameterize themselves. Basically, what that means is that they're going to look over the last 14 days of data for patterns, seasonal patterns, or other changes that are common in your application, but are not an indication of any failure scenario. And they'll go ahead and filter those out. So the machine learning has calibrated itself and is beginning to look for anomalies. That brings us here to the orange box in our diagram, which is the DevOps Guru Insight. The insight has three primary pieces. The first being the metrics that are analyzed. It'll identify and group together any anomalies that are occurring in your application. And as far as the effectiveness of the system, the detection of anomalies is quite robust, and we are able to detect a significant number of the anomalies and activities that are going on in your application. Once we've collected those together and are putting them into the insight, we will go out and pull what we call enrichment data, or related events. So from the CloudTrail management log, we're pulling any of the mutating events such as configuration change or the deployment of a resource, anything that could be related to the set of anomalies that we're seeing and have collected for you. And thirdly, it will provide recommendations for remediation or mitigation. So it looks at the anomalies that have been identified, as well as what it's been able to glean from the logs, and it'll identify additional information sources for you to learn or understand more of the data that we're seeing, or specific recommendations about actions you should take to remediate the issue that it's identified by doing this pattern matching. Those three pieces are bundled together again into a DevOps Guru Insight that is then available in our console. It's published through an integration with Systems Manager Ops Center. So if you're using that service, these insights will show up as ops items. And it's also published through Simple Notification Service and can be picked up by several third-party partners that are already integrated with the SNS. We understand that at the end of the day, you have existing processes and operations. You're using a collection of tools, be it ticketing systems or incident management systems, and we want to make sure that the information from DevOps Guru is getting to you where you are, and we're able to fit into your existing workflows, whether you've adopted an SRE process, a DevOps process, or any of the other configurations that we see in the marketplace. As part of the Code Guru family, we have two other services, Code Guru Reviewer, which is using machine learning to evaluate Java and Python code when you check it in to provide recommendations for either bug fixes or optimizations, as well as Code Guru Profiler, which is a lightweight agent running in production that also provides recommendations for improvement of performance or cost efficiency. I want to thank you today for listening to Keith and I talk about DevOps Guru's processes, as well as Keith's journey at Fidelity Investments. Thank you so much for your time.